For decades, Canadians crossed the U.S. border with little more than a passport and a quick smile. It felt routine, almost like visiting a neighbor. But in 2025, that trust is slipping away. Washington has rolled out new requirements and, even more troubling, started enforcing old rules with new intensity. The result? Ordinary Canadians are being pulled into secondary inspections, questioned about their devices, and even told to register like foreign nationals if they stay longer than 30 days. The real problem is the lack of warning. Most travelers only discover the changes when they're stopped, searched, or turned back. By then, it's too late. For Canadians, the border has gone from familiar to hostile, and the shift is only accelerating. So today, we're breaking down 7 U.S. border rules you can't ignore in 2025, and why crossing south has never felt riskier. Number 1, the 30-day rule. For decades, Canadians could spend months in the U.S. with little more than a passport stamp. Snowbirds stayed the whole winter, and nobody asked questions. That has changed in 2025. A new Department of Homeland Security rule now requires Canadians who stay more than 30 consecutive days to register with U.S. immigration. It doesn't matter if you're in Florida, Arizona, or California. Once your trip passes that 30-day mark, you're no longer just a visitor. You're officially part of America's immigration record. But it doesn't stop there. After registering, Canadians are also expected to carry proof of that registration at all times. Not just your passport, an extra document proving you complied with the rule. And here's the catch. If an officer asks for it and you can't provide it, you could face questioning, fines, or even problems re-entering the U.S. later. Officials say this is about security, but for Canadians, it feels like a major shift. What used to be a simple relationship now comes with red tape and the risk of being flagged. The message is clear. Long stays aren't hassle-free anymore. The 30-day rule has officially raised the stakes for Canadian travelers. And if you think that's only a problem for snowbirds, think again. Even short trips at land borders are facing new scrutiny. Number 2, land crossings under scrutiny. For many Canadians, crossing by car has always felt easier than flying. The drive to Buffalo, Detroit, or Vermont was routine. Most people expected a quick glance at their passport and a wave through. But that's no longer the case in 2025. U.S. Customs and Border Protection is putting far more focus on land crossings. What used to be casual now often comes with detailed questions, longer waits, and more inspections. Questions that once came up only in special cases, like how long you'll stay, where you'll be living, or even your work history, are now becoming routine for ordinary Canadians. Part of the change is technology. License plate scanners, expanded databases, and information sharing agreements with Canada give officers more tools to flag travelers. And part of it is political, an atmosphere of suspicion that makes even short trips feel tense. For Canadians who cross often for shopping, sports, or weekend getaways, the tone has shifted. It's less welcome neighbor and more prove you belong here. The land border hasn't closed, but in 2025, it's a very different experience, one where every Canadian is under the microscope. But it's not just questions about where you're going. Officers are also digging into the most personal part of your life, your phone. Number 3, device searches at the border. Imagine this. You've made it to the border, handed over your passport, and just as you expect the usual questions, the officer points to your phone and says, "Unlock it." That moment is becoming far more common in 2025. New data shows almost 15,000 devices were searched between April and June alone, a record high. That's a 21% jump from just 3 months earlier and higher than any previous peak. Phones, laptops, and tablets are all fair game. Officers can scroll through photos, emails, WhatsApp messages, and even social media accounts. And here's the part that worries Canadians most. They can demand your password. If you refuse, you risk being detained or turned back. Immigration lawyers warn Canadians have very little protection. Stuart Friedman says devices can even be seized for up to 5 days without further authorization. And Vancouver lawyer James Hayes calls the crackdown unnecessary and says it's creating animosity toward Canadians. Ottawa has updated its travel advice, warning citizens to expect device checks under Trump's broader border crackdown. Some Canadians who refuse to comply have even lost their visa-exempt status. For many, it's not just about inconvenience anymore. It's the feeling of being treated like a suspect, simply for carrying a phone. And it doesn't stop at your devices. The US is now pulling more of your personal information directly from Canadian systems, whether you realize it or not. Number 4. Hidden data sharing. One of the biggest changes Canadians don't see at the border is happening behind the scenes. That's the information sharing agreement between Ottawa and Washington. In recent years, both governments have quietly expanded how much personal data flows across the border. Travel history, immigration records, even details about past applications are now more easily exchanged. And in 2025, new amendments have strengthened that pipeline even further. What does it mean in practice? A Canadian flagged in one database could be stopped at the US border, even if they've never had an issue before. Minor infractions or past refusals don't disappear. They follow you. Privacy advocates in Canada warn that information collected for one purpose, like a visa application, can now be repurposed for border screening. And Canadians rarely know what data has been shared until it's too late. For travelers, it creates a chilling effect. Crossing no longer depends only on what you say to the officer in front of you. It also depends on the invisible digital file already waiting for you, one you may never see until it's used against you. And for Canadians with dual citizenship, that hidden trail comes with even more risk, turning a second passport into a red flag. Number 5. Dual citizens under question. For years, Canadians with dual citizenship didn't think twice about crossing the US border. If you had a Canadian passport, you were treated like any other visitor. But that's changing in 2025. Under Trump's broader security crackdown, Canadians with ties to certain regions are being pulled aside more often. Travelers holding dual citizenship, especially from countries Washington places on security watch lists, are facing longer interviews, extra document checks, and in some cases, outright refusals. The rules themselves aren't new. The United States has always claimed the right to screen dual nationals more closely. What's different now is the enforcement. Lawyers say it's ramped up dramatically this year, and it's leaving travelers confused and intimidated. The timing also matters. In June, the U.S. announced a sweeping new travel ban on a dozen countries. Canadians aren't covered by it directly, but if you hold dual nationality from one of those countries, you can expect tougher questions. Even if you present only your Canadian passport, suspicion follows. For many, it feels like a reversal. What used to be a strength, holding 2 passports, is now seen at the U.S. border as a liability. Number 6. Vehicle searches and inspections. Another trend Canadians are noticing in 2025 is the rise in secondary inspections and vehicle searches. What used to be a quick drive across the border is now a stressful waiting game. Travelers report being pulled aside more often, even when nothing seems suspicious. Some spend an hour or more in a secondary inspection room, answering detailed questions about their travel plans, work history, and finances. For many, it feels less like a routine check and more like an interrogation. Vehicle searches are also on the rise. Cars are being pulled into inspection bays, trunks opened, bags unpacked, and even glove compartments checked. And one issue keeps catching Canadians off guard: cannabis. While perfectly legal in Canada, cannabis remains illegal under U.S. federal law. Even the faint smell or traces left behind in a car can give officers an excuse to tear it apart. The risk is real. Travelers have been fined, denied entry, or flagged in the system over amounts so small they didn't even realize they were carrying them. Officers argue these inspections are about security. But for ordinary Canadians, the sudden increase feels like harassment. In 2025, crossing by car isn't routine anymore. It's a gamble, one where the odds are stacked against you. Number 7. Penalties and Turn-Backs. The harshest part of these new rules isn't just the inconvenience. It's the consequences when things go wrong. Canadians who fail to register for long stays, refuse a device search, or get caught with prohibited items are discovering that U.S. border penalties are tougher than ever. Being turned back at the border is no longer just an embarrassing setback. It can leave a mark on your record that follows you for years. Lawyers warn that Canadians denied entry can lose their visa-exempt status, meaning future trips would require applying for a visa, an expensive and time-consuming process. Others face expedited removal orders, which carry bans of 5 years or longer. Even small issues, like failing to declare cash over the $10,000 threshold, can trigger fines and lasting flags in the system. And the power imbalance is clear. At the border, officers have sweeping authority, and travelers have very few ways to fight back in the moment. For Canadians, the message is sobering. One mistake, one refusal, or even one misunderstanding can turn a simple shopping trip into a long-term travel headache. In 2025, the cost of crossing unprepared is higher than it has ever been. The border isn't just about new rules anymore. It's about a relationship that's grown tense and suspicious. For Canadians, crossing in 2025 isn't welcoming. It's unpredictable, invasive, and high risk. Have you been stopped or questioned under these new rules? Share your experience in the comments. We may feature it in a future video. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay informed.